Good evening, everyone. We are now in the book of Daniel. We left off in verse 15, but by way of a review, I'd like to put it back into a context before we continue this evening. Verse 12 is far enough that we can actually draw our context. The context is when Daniel and the three young men or young boys, if you want to call them, we are looking at youth that is around the age of 12, then no more than 15. And so Daniel was bold enough and he confided in the chief that he would want to eat different things in his mind would be, I guess you can call it kosher. Kosher in the sense that it doesn't uh, violate the dietary law that was given in the book of Leviticus. And so we can actually see that Daniel and the three young men are very committed to God's rules, fully aware that they are God's people. And so, in rejecting to eat the king's food, it's not as simple as saying, I don't want. And so, there was this plan to be tested. And he says, test for 10 days. I wanted to reiterate this word test is to put somebody onto a pedestal. It is to lift up someone that you can see whether this person will fulfill certain conditions or not. And that's the meaning of test. And it is only for 10 days. So please do not look at 10 days to say that this is a special divine recipe for good health. It's nothing like that. 10 days was good enough to see if there is any physical differences that the servant or the butler who was actually providing the food would be able to tell if there was any difference. Now, we also highlighted that this word vegetables do not mean vegetables, they mean pulse or seeds. And they would cook themselves and they would eat and drink water. And in so doing, you find that they are not eating the king's food, which would be very rich. They are not drinking the king's wine, which would be the best in the land. Because the king would say that, if it's good enough for the king, it's good enough for these kids to take care of them so that they are brought up to be the healthiest and the best looking, and they would be fed with the best of the land so they wouldn't lack. Daniel and his three buddies had decided that they would go according to God's dietary law. And so, when in doubt, work on the least common denominator water and pulse. Pulse meaning seeds. And so, you can't go wrong with this. Seeds would include wheat, corn, barley, and so on and so forth. And then the examination here is not the word examine in the typical Hebrew word. This word really means uh, to see. And to see means to inspect. And so this test here is visual. There is no scientific test in those days. So the steward is actually supposed to compare the Daniel and his friends versus the rest of the children who are there. Now, very quickly, after 10 days, we are told that at the end of the 10 days, their appearance, what is seen, is actually better. Now, the word better is the word good, right? Is the word tov. good. Now, what that means is it is pleasing to the steward. His job is made easier. There is nothing wrong with Daniel and his friends eating seeds and drinking water. In fact, we are told in Daniel chapter 15 that the flesh was fatter. And so this word fatter means the flesh is fat. That is what it means. The flesh is fat. So filled with fat. Better than the rest of the kids. Verse 16, again, remember, we have words that is not translated. We have the and then, meaning after the test, this butler decided to withhold their choice food and wine they were to drink. This would be the king's, right? The king's food and wine. This was given to the rest of the youth. And so far, for the 10 days, he has actually not given them this. He has actually given them the pulse, the seeds. And so what he did was this word is he kept giving them vegetables. No, this is pulse or seeds, not vegetables. And I guess not vegetable in our modern day sense. Now, this word withhold their choice uh, basically means that he took up. Now, this word took up means he didn't give it to them, he took it for himself. Since nobody wants to eat it, so he's eating it for himself. Verse 17, and for these four youths, we call them youths, they are young kids. We see that this word God, this is Elohim. This is the name of God. So Elohim gave. Now, we need to understand this idea. The word give has a number of understanding. The word give is to grant, to enable. I think would be a good way of explaining this. God did not put into their minds things that weren't there before. And so God enabled abilities. Now, understand that abilities require the children or the youths here to activate, to use. It is not a subliminal absorption of things. So understand that this word gave is about enabling, right? Enabling. And so what God enabled them? God enabled them with knowledge. Now, knowledge is the, I guess you can say the intelligence. I think intelligence is a good way to understand this. Intelligence. And the second word here, uh, I guess you can say that this word here is really not intelligence. So the first word is intelligence. The second word, as describe intelligence in every kind of literature and expertise, does not mean intelligence. It actually means it actually means to be able comprehend to comprehend all kinds of literature. As you know what literature means, they are books, and in the library of the king. There's lots for them to read. And this other word here, expertise, is actually wisdom. Now, why are there so much differences in the English translation from the Hebrew? I cannot explain. But all I want to let us understand is that this is about God enabling them with ability to learn. And this is the important part. If they cannot learn, they are of no use to the king. And so God gave them that ability, and we call it intelligence. And so the faculty to learn. And the faculty to learn gives them knowledge. And hence, this word knowledge is a good word. The second word here is comprehending all kinds of literature that the Babylonians had. Now, understand this. The children are from Judah. The things that they learn are from the kingdom of Judah. They would be learning the Torah. They'd be learning things that are in the palace of the king. However, the library of the king of Babylon is rich in other things. And so these children are learning new knowledge from the literature, and they are gaining wisdom. And with this, I want to explain what is wisdom. Wisdom is the extraordinary insight. I would call it extraordinary insight. Now, what does that mean? It means this: everybody reads the same books, everybody looks at the same situation, but the one with wisdom has a way of looking at things that he can come away with a deeper understanding. And given that deeper understanding or the broader understanding of the same books, the same situation, he is able to see more and thereby be able to solve more problems, be able to give solutions to what people can't see as the problem. And that is what wisdom is all about. So he has the faculty to learn a lot of knowledge. He has the ability to comprehend all kinds of literature, which is knowledge literature. And he has wisdom to be able to see more than other people. We go on and then we see this. Daniel even understood all kinds of visions and dreams. And this is what we need to explain a little bit. The idea of vision is something that he can see. And the idea of dreams is actually something that he would dream, right? He would be asleep, that he dreams. He's able to see, but in a way where he would be not fully asleep. Now, I need to explain this. We all know dreams, and dreams is what we can see in our mind when we are fast asleep. Visions, on the other hand, is the ability to see when you are not asleep. That's the only way to differentiate visions from dreams. God is using that state between awake and asleep. So let me just put that down. It is between awake and asleep. That portion is not fully awake, not fully asleep. And that is that portion of the awareness of the individual to be able to communicate with the divine. in a different realm, in a different dimension. That's as simple as I can put it. And so you find that the Navi, the prophets, are able to hear God, to see things from God, because they have this ability in this sense of awareness between awake and asleep. And so that is why, in some cases, people call Daniel a Navi, a prophet, because he has the ability to see visions. But the word here is not about seeing. Now, seeing is one thing, but we have this idea called understand. Understand here, to be able to tell the parts. This is what it means. To tell the parts, to be able to discern the parts and construct the whole, right? To be able to tell the parts, to construct the whole. Now, what does that mean? It means this, that he is able to see the visions, and he can actually explain the individual components of the vision and then see the big picture. Now, this is the meaning of understanding. There is, he has this ability, as the vision is presented to him in its individual components, he can understand the components itself. He can tell what it means. And then when you put it all together, he can tell what the entirety of the story is. That is the skill that God had given Daniel, not to the other three, but only to Daniel. He possesses that extra ability. He also understands dreams, which is the fact that when people tell the story of the dream, he can tell the various parts, what it means, and then he can tell the whole when you put it all together. So, same thing with visions and dreams, because later on, Daniel will see visions, and very strange visions. He is able to interpret dreams like Joseph. And this is an understanding that God would give to him. His ability to understand dreams is when God tells him what it means, and he understands what he is told, so that he can tell whoever dreamed what the dream means. So it is not that Daniel has this innate knowledge of all kinds of dreams. It's because God can speak to him through visions and tell him in such a way where he himself can understand, and then he can explain to the one who dreamed what the dream actually meant. Now, understand that verse 17 is not a historical development, but rather the narrative that's written back after all these things have happened. Not written by Daniel, but written by trusted, faithful people in the community who were entrusted to write some of these things, who knew Daniel and what happened in the palace. And so we can safely say that Daniel and his friends were not the only Jewish people in the palace. Of course, later on, we can tell that there were other people besides Daniel that were there in the palace. But in this particular book, our focus is Daniel and the three young men with him. And the focus amongst the four young boys, the primary character that we are told in this book is Daniel. And so Daniel himself is the outstanding individual of this story. And we are told that he had done incredible things. Now, the reason why he is not listed under the books of the prophets is because he is not doing the traditional prophetic work being sent by God to warn his people, to rebuke his people, to tell the people what's going to happen, to prophesy to the people of things that is going to happen if they do not repent. And so Daniel is not in that mode. And so there is no more mode because the nation of Judah, the southern kingdom, is already gone. And he is not there. He is taken away at the time of Jehoiakim, because at the end of Jehoiakim, you find that um, Nebuchadnezzar had wanted to impose a very strict rule. Here we are told as an after the fact of the character of Daniel. We read in verse 18. Now, verse 18 is a separate episode altogether. So please understand that in the book of Daniel, like in many other books, it is a historical narrative. When the narrative are stuck together, we have the and thens at the beginning of the verse, although not translated. But then we will have indication of the language that is a fresh start of a new topic. And verse 18 is that part of the new topic. Then at the end of the days which the king had specified for presenting them, the commander of the officials or the saris or the eunuchs presented them before Nebuchadnezzar. Now we need to remember this. Do you recall how long they were in training? It is very important for us to recognize that the end of the days is at the period of 3 years. And that would be in verse 5. These kids are given 3 years of learning experience, and this would be the test to see whether they can stand before the king. In verse 18, the king had specified 3 years, and then to come to them, to cause them to come, I think would be a better way. This is to cause to come. Presenting is to cause them to come before the king. Now, this idea of present is an interpretation. So how it is presented, we are not told. But the idea here is to bring these young children taken from the royalties and the nobilities of the house of Judah and train them up, make sure they are healthy and strong and very well learned, and with all the ability to stand before the king, to be able to handle what the king wants them to do. And so that was what happened. This word presented is the same word. When the time came, the chief of the officials or the chief of the eunuchs, who is the boss of the butler who was giving them food, this commander is the one that is responsible for all the children from Judah that was brought in. Verse 19. Now, verse 19 has the word and then. So as you can see, this is new, and then this is a continuation. That is what I had meant. And then the king actually spoke with them. This is the way that the king would test. The word talk here is a very interesting word. And the word is in the PL, it's in the intensive. It is the way the king speaks. the king would speak formally with them, and the king is there to try to understand and try to uh, tell them apart. And what did the king do? These are all the young men, and the king's judgment is this: from out of them all, and there's a missing word, from out of them all, then we are told not one was found like Daniel. Then we have Hananiah, Mishael, and then we have Azariah. The four of them was found to be outstanding. Now, what do you mean by outstanding? This is the way that the Hebrew was trying to explain in this verse, is that out of all the kids that were presented, there were many, many of them. Now, this word here is that the king could not find, because the king was the one who was doing the examination and found that there were a few of them, and in this case, four of them were outstanding in the king's judgment. That's what it means here. The king spoke to all of them, and then out of them, there were four that was so outstanding that nobody is close to them. And the king made a decision, and it says here, and then, now this is the word here, and then, because of the king's work, and then they entered the king's personal service. I noticed that this translation has a lot of interpretation. So let me explain what the text actually say here. And then they were made to stand, and they stood, right? They stood to the faces of the king. Now, yes, you can say that they entered into the personal service of the king. That's an interpretation. Not to say that that's wrong, but that's not what the text actually said. The text is more general. It said that the king made them stand to his face. And so, what essentially that would mean is that while the king had other people, the king had selected these four to be next to him that he can call on when he needed them. They were four special, I guess you can call them his personal dictionary, his personal almanac, his personal walking encyclopedia. Things that when the king doesn't know, he would turn to these four. Now, what does that really mean in the service of the king? In verse 20, we are told that for every matter of expertise, and this word is not really expertise, this word is wisdom. And then he says that and understanding. Now, what does that mean? Remember, we had talked about wisdom. Wisdom is that acute insight that they could see more of the situation of the problem than anybody else. And hence, they will be able to understand better. And to understand in this word is to be able to tell the parts so that this knowledge of the whole is intensified. Just bear in mind that Solomon had asked God for wisdom. What does that mean? It's the same idea here. It is not just knowledge, but he has an acute ability to see more in the same problem, in the same event, in the same books. He can actually see broader and deeper than other people, and thereby gain more knowledge to be able to dissect and tell the meanings of the parts from the whole. A little bit more complicated way of describing wisdom, not expertise, and understanding. And these would be the questions that the king had consulted them. The king consulted them means sought their advice. I think that is a very interesting idea. Consulted here means seek answers. And that's why they are standing before the king. They are the king's walking dictionary, the king's encyclopedia, the king's smart people. And so the king would turn to them when the king needs answers. And so the king would consult them. Now, the king had other people around. And so it says here, he found them 10 times better than all the soothsayer, priests, conjurers who were all in his realm. Now, let me briefly explain these words. The first word here, soothsayer, is a necromancer. Now, soothsayer, priest. I think this is what the English was trying to play with the word. Soothsayer is a necromancer. In this word, the necromancer is somebody who can use bones of the dead to find answers. The second word here is conjurers. Uh, Conjurers here literally means astrologers. Astrologers. Necromancer is also another word to talk about magicians. Somebody who is able to deal with the sciences, an alchemist. And so just understand that these are not people who are dealing with the another dimension. These are people who tries to find answers beyond a human realm. And it appears that they have some supernatural abilities, a bit of spark here, a bit of fire there. And then astrologers, people who would look at the sun, moon, and stars, particularly the stars, and tries to associate meanings as to apply to events. And so this word conjurers and soothsayers, priests, I think that would be too much of an interpretation. Magicians and astrologers is actually a good way to describe this. The king of Babylon had many of these people. He needed answers, and his answers will come from his wise men. And so you can call them the Magi's. The Magi's are also magician. So Magi, you can see this word right here, Magi. So they are magicians. They are people with the ability to be able to tell events and things. People would think that they are wise men, but they use tools like bones of the dead. They look at stars and they try to correlate events and the cosmos. Where else you find that Daniel and his friends are 10 times better and they don't do any of these things. God gave them the ability to see things, to know things more than other people. That's wisdom. The magicians or necromancer or alchemists or astrologers, they are not wise people. They are using the natural realm to try to devise answers and see what matches. But not so with Daniel and his friends. They really have knowledge and they can see problems in a deeper and broader way. And so when the king asks them for answers, they are able to give the king answers that the king can accept. That is what it means to stand next to the king with his band of wise people. Now, we need to understand one very important aspect here. These four young men are young. In an Eastern environment, they are not looked upon as of any use. Too young. If they were 12, you give them 3 years, they will be 15 at this point in time. Most people won't give them the time of day. But because of what God enabled them to have more wisdom and knowledge and understanding, they stand out. And so they could give answers to the king that is far better. How would the king be able to say that they are 10 times better? Well, it is not a matter of weighing, but it is a feel of the king that the answers that these young kids can give to the king can look at it and the king can weigh it and make sense of it 10 times more than the rest. And that is what it means by 10 times. It's an abstract quality. It's a way of expressing they are heads and shoulders above all the traditional magicians and astrologers. In verse 21, we have this word and this word is and then. Daniel, and this word here is continued until the first year of Cyrus the king. Now, this idea of Cyrus the king is to tell us that it is till the end of the 70 years. And Cyrus is told by Isaiah that he is God's anointed to allow the people to return back to Judah to rebuild the city and the temple. This word continued literally means was present. He was present in the highest level of the kingdom. He was present in the royal level of the kingdom until Cyrus. And this is an extremely long period of time. And given this, that is why Daniel in chapter 9 was trying to figure out when that 70 years have come, has it gone? And so Daniel had to understand when he is told. By himself, he may not understand everything. And so God has to tell him what the vision and what the dreams mean. And so thereby he has the understanding to tell whoever asks the questions. We need always to remember that it is not an innate ability to interpret dreams. Unless God gives the answers, Daniel would not be able to understand. And hence, when we come to chapter 2, we will be able to understand what it means when Daniel interprets dreams. Because dream is not something which a human by himself will be able to explain, especially when there is a divine message. Now, Daniel chapter 1 concludes this way that it paints a broad stroke to give us an introduction of who Daniel is. And he was brought in together with Jehoiakim, after the reign of Jehoiakim and brought into Babylon, and he was trained up for 3 years. And by the time of verse 20, he was there before the king answering questions. And verse 21 briefly just give us a broad stroke. He was there for a long, long time, 70 years in the level of royalty. And so with this, we come to the end of our session today.